Good morning, all of you. This is time that we discuss a few more critiques from English literature belonging to the various European countries. So we take into consideration the critics from the ancient Greece, like Aristotle and Plato, and Horace from Rome, and Philip Sidney from England, Dr. Johnson also from England, and there are the American critics like M.H.Abrams. And we take into consideration the critics from the various countries as part of the European tradition. And this is time that we discuss an American critic, M.H.Abrams. And he is originally named Mayor Howard Mike Abrams. Mayor Howard Mike Abrams. Very interestingly, Abrams continued to live up to 102 years. So he had a long life. And he died only in 2015, say some 6 years before. He was born in 1912 and he continued to live up to 102 years and was dead only in 2015 at the age of 102. And Abrams was actually a critic from America and was a student of I.A. Richards. We have already seen I.A. Richards. Richards came out with his books like Practical Criticism, Meaning of Meaning, and these books influenced the new critics to start the new criticism movement. And Abrams was a student of I.A. Richards. So imbibed the technique of criticizing literary works and thinking in a philosophic manner. From I.A. Richards, he imbibed the critical techniques from his master I.A. Richards. Abrams was born in a very poor family. His father was only a house painter. And Abrams was the first person to go to a college from his family. He was the first person to go to a college from family. And he joined the famous Harvard University and later came to England and joined at Cambridge. And Abrams is known for his romanticism, particularly his book, The Mirror and the Lamp. M.H.Abrams is very popular for his book, The Mirror and the Lamp. Very recently, UGC asked the question, who is the author of The Mirror and the Lamp? In fact, to match the title and the name of the author. The Mirror and the Lamp was produced by M.H.Abrams. And in The Mirror and the Lamp, we come to find Abrams making a comparison between the neoclassics and the romantics and making the romantics greater in glory than the neoclassics. And Abrams was a critic of romanticism. And he had edited the Norton Anthology also, especially on the period of romanticism. And he had his views on Byron, Shelley, Keats, and all the romantic poets were studied by him very well and made opinions also. And he edited the Norton Anthology, especially on the area detailing romanticism. I told you, Abrams became very popular with his book, The Mirror and the Lamp. And it is in this context we have to remember another title very similar to this title. It is Mirror and the Light. The Mirror and the Light is a novel written by Hilary Mantel. Hilary Mantel is a living British writer who received a Booker Prize twice for her novels Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies. She was awarded Booker Prize. She was the first woman to receive twice the Booker Prize. And she produced a trilogy of novels. The first two novels were awarded the Booker Prize. And she produced one more novel with the intention of winning a third Booker. And it was entitled The Mirror and the Light. And she brought out it in 2020 and submitted for the Booker consideration, and it was included in the long list of the Booker Prize. But she was not shortlisted and she was not awarded. She received a Booker Prize twice for the first two novels in the trilogy of Thomas Cromwell. The story is the story of Thomas Cromwell, who lived during the time of Henry VIII. He lived during the time of Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII. And he was in close terms with Henry VIII, but later there came some disagreements, and he was executed also under orders of Henry VIII, Thomas Cromwell. And Thomas Cromwell was considered as a villainous character by most of the people. But Hilary Mantel produced him in a sympathetic light. And she produced one more novel in the trilogy, and it was entitled The Mirror and the Light. That appeared in 2020, but she could not receive a Booker Prize for the final novel in the trilogy. And a very similar title can be found from M.H.Abrams also. And remember always, Mirror and the Light is a novel by Hilary Mantel, and Mirror and the Lamp is a critical book, a book of criticism produced by M.H.Abrams. And the title seems to be very significant also. In the Mirror and the Lamp, he maintained that until Romantics, literature was typically understood as a mirror. Until the arrival of the Romantics, there was neoclassicism, and during neoclassicism, literature seemed to be like a mirror. And when people looked into the mirror, the real world was produced on the mirror in a kind of imitation. The real world was produced on the mirror in a kind of mimesis. So it was during the neoclassical period, literature appeared like a reflection found on a mirror. So the title seems to be very significant. So during the neoclassical period, literature appeared like a mirror. And from the mirror, people could find the real life produced in a way of mimesis. But for the Romantics. But when the Romantics came, writing became more like a lamp. Lamp actually is light. In Hilary Mantel's novel, it is mirror and light. And in M.H.Abrams' book, it is mirror and lamp. L-A-M-P, lamp. Lamp also means a light. In the opinion of M.H.Abrams, literature seemed to be like a lamp or a light during the Romantic period. And the light of the writer's inner soul. Actually, why it is called light or lamp? Because the light of the writer's inner soul spilled out to illuminate the world. Actually, the writer's soul appeared like a light, and it illuminated the world also at the same time. As far as the neoclassics are concerned, literature seemed to be like a mirror. Literature seemed to be a reflection found on a mirror. And they produced real life in a way of imitation. And as far as the romantics are concerned, the mind or soul of the writer seemed to be like a lamp, a burning lamp, and the light reflected on the people also. The people also felt attracted to the illumination of the inner soul of the writers. In the Romantic period, literature seemed to be like a burning light. So there was a light in the inner soul of the writers, and that came out and illuminated the world also. The light spilled out and illuminated the world. M.H.Abrams was a great admirer of the Romantic period, and he made elaborate study on the Romantic area. And he edited the Norton Anthology also, especially on the Romantic era. Romanticism was his subject. And in his opinion, during the Romantic period, the inner soul of the poet appeared like a burning torch, illuminating the world. But during the neoclassical time, literature seemed to be like a reflection on a mirror, and that presented real life in a kind of mimesis. And I told you, he edited the Norton Anthology, Norton. It was a publishing house, Norton Publishing House. And they produced an anthology on the various literary eras. And M.H.Abrams was asked to produce the Norton Anthology on the Romantic period. And he was joined by other famous writers of the time, like David Deutsches. Deutsches was also there, working as an editor in the Norton Anthology. And Stephen Greenblatt, the great American critic of Shakespeare, Stephen Greenblatt, also joined with M.H.Abrams for the publication of the Norton Anthology. And Stephen Greenblatt actually produced the Norton Anthology on Shakespeare, and he was an expert of Shakespeare. And David Deutsches, Stephen Greenblatt, and such eminent personalities were there with M.H.Abrams while producing the Norton Anthology. And in his introduction to Byron, very interesting observations can be found from the Norton Anthology edited by M.H.Abrams. And he observes Byron imitating Nietzsche. And the Byronic hero is almost like the Nietzsche's superhero. Nietzsche was a German philosopher who spoke about the superhero, and he lived during the 19th century. So he was born in 1844 and died in 1900, exactly in the year 1900. The German philosopher Nietzsche was dead, and Nietzsche was the one who developed the idea of the superhero. And actually, Byron's hero, or the Byronic hero is a young man, probably so disappointed with the things around him, looking for new adventures, seducing women, and wandering in the other worlds, having new experiences and looking for more experiences. So a leisurely moving, pleasure-seeking, contemplative, loved by women is the Byronic hero. In Downtown, he presents the opposite of the Byronic hero, the negative Byronic hero. So in the other books like Child Harold, we come to find the Byronic hero. Byronic hero was first introduced by Byron in his Child Harold's Pilgrimage. And later in his works we come to find, so quite often the Byronic hero is presented by Byron, a world-weary young man wandering around the world and looking for more adventure, seducing women. And in Don John we come to find the hero is seduced by women. And this is the negative side of the Byronic hero. And actually, in the opinion of M.H.Abrams, the Byronic hero was actually an adaptation of Nietzsche's superhero, or equaled Nietzsche's superhero, the Byronic hero. The Byronic hero equaled Nietzsche's idea of the superhuman. And in the introduction to Shelley, very interestingly, he made an observation. The tragedy of Shelley's short life was that, and he maintained the idea that the tragedy of Shelley's short life was that he brought disaster, not upon himself, but upon all those who loved him. He actually brought disaster upon everyone who stood around him, not only upon himself. He died when he was only 29 years old. And Shelley was a victim of a tragic life. So he fell in love with a girl, and after all, so the girl gave him 2 children also, and finally she committed suicide. And there were problems between him and his first wife. And during the time he fell in love with Mary Wollstonecraft and got married with her, eloped with her and got married with her. And he had a son in that relationship, and he became dead early. And Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, the one who wrote Frankenstein, continued to live as a widow until her death. And Shelley's father, Timothy, also was made to suffer because of the careless attitude of his son. Shelley was irresponsible and he was careless. He didn't care for the feelings of his father, and he brought tragedy to one and all who stood around him. And M.H.Abrams observed that the tragedy of Shelley's short life was that he brought disaster and suffering upon himself and on those people who loved him. And Abrams classified literary theory into 4, and this is one very important thing that we have to remember. And Abrams classified literary theory into 4, and the first division is called the mimetic division. So interested in the relationship between work and universe, and it is based on the relationship between work and universe. How the work is, a literary work is connected with the universe. And the next is pragmatic, and it is actually the relation between the work and the audience, and it is called pragmatic. And the third division is called expressive, and it actually speaks about the relation between work and the artist. And the last is called the division objective, and objective is the close reading of the text. And M.H.Abrams also advised to read the text closely, like the new critics. The new critics emphasized the reading of the text, and M.H.Abrams actually inspired the new critics, and he also of the opinion to have an objective reading of the text, a close reading. M.H.Abrams classified literary theory into 4, and the first division is called mimetic, the second is pragmatic, and the third is expressive, and the last is objective. Mimetic is actually the relation between the work and the universe, and pragmatic is the relation between the work and the audience, and expressive is the relation between the work and the artist, and objective is a close reading of the text. And remember always that M.H.Abrams classified literary theory into 4. And the first division is called mimetic, and it speaks about the relationship between the literary work and the universe. And the second is called pragmatic, and it speaks about the relation between the work and the audience. And the third, expressive, speaking about the relation between the work and the author. And the last is called objective, a close reading of the text. And M.H.Abrams, I told you, was a student of I.A. Richards, was a friend of Stephen Greenblatt and David Deutsches, and was also a very popular teacher who taught people like Harold Bloom and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak and Harold Bloom were the students of M.H.Abrams. And thank you for the time being.